So over the summer of 2020, a lot of media members and sports writers didn't really cover the anniversary of the Richard riot. Now, 65 years ago, this was probably the most infamous hockey incident of all time. There's nothing compares with it in sports history. This would be akin to Tom Brady getting suspended for a number of games for football gate, and half of Boston rioting and people burning each other and fighting in the streets. Not going to happen. What was it over? What became of the riot, and what led to it? We're going to talk about that. I'm going to try to divide it up into two podcasts, might be three, because it's very intense. And if you're an American for the first time hearing this, I have to explain, yes, this really occurred. A hockey game the decision led to a cultural and political revolution that almost led to the breakup of Canada. Sounds intriguing, doesn't it? Okay, let's go on. Now, the Richard riot took place on March 17, 1955, which is St. Patrick's Day in Canada, in Montreal, Quebec. The riot was named after Maurice Richard, a star ice hockey player for the Habs, following a violent confrontation on March 13th in which Richard hit a linesman. NHL President Clarence Campbell, a noted anti-francophone, suspended him for the remainder of the 55 season, including the playoffs. Now, Montreal fans took to the streets and protested that the suspension was too severe. The team's largely francophone fan base claimed the lengthy suspension was motivated by Campbell's racism and Richard's French-Canadian ethnicity. Outside of Montreal, however, the suspension was seen as justified and, if anything, too short. Depends on who you talk to there. Now, on March 17, Campbell appeared at the Montreal Forum for the Canadiens' first game after Richard's suspension. His presence provoked a riot at the Forum that spilled into the streets. The riot caused $100,000 in property damage, which was, I think, about $2 million now, 37 injuries and 100 arrests. Tensions eased after Richard made a personal plea on radio, accepting his punishment and promising return the following year to help the team win the Stanley Cup. The incident likely cost Richard the 55 scoring title, a honor Richard never achieved in his NHL career, and played a role in the off-season departure of longtime Canadiens head coach and some believe anti-francophone Dick Irvin. Now, it also cost Montreal the Cup that year. They were probably going to roll to their first championship in the last few years. But what was ironic about this, ladies and gentlemen, after the riot and the ramifications, they won 5 straight cups. Now, just a little bit of background now. Maurice the Rocket Richard was a star player for the Habs, and it was common for opponents to provoke him during games. Teams reportedly sent players on the ice to purposely annoy him by yelling ethnic slurs, hooking, slashing, and holding him as much as possible. Now, throughout his career, Richard was fined and suspended several times for retaliatory assaults on players and officials, including a $250 fine for slapping a linesman in the face less than 3 months before the March 13 incident. Now, Richard was considered the embodiment of French Canadians, or Quebecois, and was a hero during a time when many perceived himself as second-class citizens. He was revered when he fought the damn English during games. In his book, The Rocket, A Cultural History of Maurice Richard, Benoit Melanson compares Richard to Major League Baseball Jackie Robinson by stating that both players represented a possibility for the minority groups to succeed in North America. Now, this came after where conscription in the 1940s sent Francophones to the war that many of them didn't want to fight in, and also the power of the Catholic Church in Quebec was butting heads with the monetary English establishment in Quebec that owned the majority of the rights over the rural and poor Francophones in the province. Now, during the 1950s, Quebec's industries and natural resources were controlled primarily by English Canadians or American entrepreneurs. Now, French-speaking Quebecers were the lowest paid ethnic group in Quebec, which resulted in a sense that control rested with the Anglophone minority. Because of this and other factors, there had been growing discontent in the years before the riot. In early 1954, Richard's teammate Bernard Geoffrion was suspended in a move seen as anti-francophone. Following the suspension, Richard, who had a weekly column in the Samedi Dimanche newspaper, called President Campbell a dictator in print. The League in turn forced Richard to retract his statement and discontinue his column. In his 1976 biography of Richard, Jean-Marie Perrin wrote that his humiliation was shared by all Francophone Quebecers, who were sent running once more by the English boot. This was reflected in a Montreal newspaper's editorial cartoon, which portrayed Richard as an unruly schoolboy made to write lines by Campbell, shown as a teacher. The cartoon had a deeper meaning as an example of the social hierarchy that existed between English and French Canadians. Basically, that the French didn't know their place within, English society in Quebec. Now, the incident involved a on-ice episode on that date, which was game was held in Boston. Richard was part of a violent confrontation in a game between the Canadians and their rival Boston Bruins. The former Montreal Canadian and now Bruins Hal Laycoe, who had previously played defense for the Habs, high-stick Richard in the head during a Montreal power play. Richard required 5 stitches to close a cut that resulted from the high stick. Referee Frank Advari signaled a delayed penalty, but allowed play to continue because the Habs had possession of the puck. When the play ended, Richard skated up to Laycoe, who had dropped his stick and gloves in anticipation of a fight, and struck him in the face and shoulders with his stick. The linesman attempted to restrain Richard, who repeatedly broke away from him to continue his attack on Laycoe, eventually breaking a stick over his opponent's body before linesman Cliff Thompson corralled him. Richard broke loose again and punched Thompson twice in the face, knocking him unconscious. Richard then left the ice with the Canadiens trainer. Now, according to the Montreal Herald reporter Vince Lunny, Richard's face resembled a smashed tomato. Richard was given a match penalty and an automatic $100 fine, while Laycoe got a 5-minute major plus a 10-minute misconduct for the high stick. Now, Boston police attempted to arrest Richard in the dressing room after the game ended, but were turned back by Habs players who barred the door, preventing any arrests. Bruins management finally persuaded the officers to leave with a promise that the NHL would handle the issue. Richard was never arrested for the incident. He was instead sent to the hospital by team doctors after complaining of concussion syndrome, including headaches and stomach pains. The Laycoe incident was Richard's second altercation with an official that season, again with a slap in the face the previous December in Toronto. Now, upon hearing the referee's report, League President Clarence Campbell ordered all parties to appear at a March 16 hearing at his office in Montreal. Now, the game's on-ice officials, Richard, Laycoe, Montreal AGM Kenny Reardon, Boston GM Lynn Patrick, Montreal coach Dick Irvin, and NHL referee-in-chief Carl Voss attended the hearing. In his defense, Richard contended that he was dazed and thought Thompson was one of Boston players. He did not deny punching or attacking Laycoe. After a hearing, Campbell issued a 1,200-word statement to the press. Not gonna talk about this because most of it was Clarence deep-seated racism against Richard. Now, this is what he said too. On the previous occasion, he was fortunate that teammates and officials were more effective in preventing him from doing injury to anyone, and the penalty was more lenient in consequence. At the time, he was warned there must be no further incident, and at the end, he said Richard will be suspended from all games, both league and playoff, for the balance of the current season. So there was no reference to the fact that he was goaded on many times, that players and teams had deliberately verbally attacked him, and came to a breaking point. And Richard has something called wild eyes, and that night, allegedly, his eyes were so wild, like, what they call dilated. If he was going to do something, no matter who was in front of him, he was going to retaliate. Like I said, coward account, he wasn't going to take any more. Now, the suspension, which was the longest that Campbell ever issued to his 31-year tenure as league president, was considered by many in Montreal to be unjust and unduly severe. Now, within minutes of the judgment's dispensation, the NHL head office, which was then in Montreal, was deluged with hundreds of calls from enraged fans, many of whom made death threats against Campbell. However, the general feeling around the league was that the punishment could have been more severe. Red Wings GM Jack Adams said that Campbell could do no less, and I thought he would be suspended until January 1st of next season. Red Wings forward Teddy Lindsay, whom the league had disciplined earlier the same season for an incident in Toronto when she attacked a Maple Leafs fan who had been threatening teammate Gordie Howe, expressed a stronger opinion that Richard was lucky not to get a life suspension. In baseball, football, or almost anything else, that much would all be almost automatic. I said he should have suspended him for life. Now, Bruins president Walter Ray Brown agreed with Adams, saying that's the least they could do. Bruins player Fleming Mackel said he had thrown the book at Richard in 47 when he cut Bill Zinke and Vic Lind. It might have stopped him and made him an even greater hockey player because of it. Interest was high in the hockey world, and the Detroit Free Press reported its switchboard was also swamped with calls. Now, that's part one of the Richard Riot podcast. Our next part, we'll talk about the riot itself and the ramifications. I think I'm going to make it a three-parter because it's a long process from start to finish. Stay tuned.